humans are complex. When people just say, oh, I'm such a simple person, I'm really just a simple person, I don't believe that for a second.
Jonathan, are there any specific exercises or techniques writers can use to bring their characters to life?
There are. In my classes, I often assign, sort of character-related exercises so that students can begin to understand what it takes to create a sort of a fully fledged, complex, lifelike character on the page. One of the first things that I say to students about this is that you have to remember that with character, you're really building from the ground up. Like, you have to create as if the reader knows absolutely nothing about this character, and so it's up to you to build the character in such a way that the reader can absorb and ultimately dream the character that you're describing. So one thing to remember is that it takes a lot of time to learn how to write fiction. It's not, you would think, oh, we all tell stories. I'll just sit down and write a story. Like, anyone should be able to do it. And yes, anyone can do it, but it takes a lot of, time, many drafts, a lot of patience in order to create characters that have that kind of effect on a reader. One way that I like to talk about character and building character is I like to compare characters to a 1,000-sided object. And what I mean by that is, if you try to imagine in your head a 1,000-sided object, you cannot do it. The human mind cannot you can picture like 8 sides, maybe 10 sides, but you cannot picture 1,000 sides. And yet you know that such a thing can exist. Like, there could be a 1,000-sided object somewhere in the world. And a 1,000-sided object is like a character in the sense that the character, just like human beings, has many facets, many dimensions. And you cannot convey all of them to a reader. Like that, even if you wrote a novel, it would be hard to convey that many characteristics. But you can convey many of them or some of them. So if you choose maybe 5 or 10 or 20 or 100 characteristics that you want to show the reader that will help define the character, then it's almost as if those other facets that are not directly described, like the reader can infer or imagine what those would be. It's sort of like meeting a new person for the first time. You're looking at the person. What are you wearing? Like, how do you talk? What language are you using? How do you dress? What do you like? What is the vibe that I'm getting from you? And it's similar with characters. You introduce them in some way to a reader so that a reader can, based on the limited information that the reader has, try to imagine an entire character. Flannery O'Connor talks about character as always involving mystery, the mystery of personality, and I think that's exactly right. Like, most people around us are mysteries to us. Even we ourselves are mysteries to ourselves. One way to explore that mystery is by doing things like telling the life story of a character. This is something that I have my students do regularly. Like, if you want to know your character better, take 750 words and just describe the character's life story from beginning until now, and look at what you learn, look at what you discover in that process. I also have a list of many, many questions that I'll sometimes have the students ask about their characters. What does the character treasure? What haunts the character? What secrets does the character keep? What does the character want? Motivation ends up being very important for creating and exploring character. Why is the character behaving the way he's behaving? An example?
Yeah, it triggered the memory of another video we did where I came up with a couple, and her name was Skylar and his name was Derek, and they meet at a cafe, and she's an attractive younger woman, and he's a little bit older, he's in IT, and he doesn't have a relationship, but he meets her and falls in love and feels like this is the one, and then he finds out she's actually being used in corporate espionage, and it was never a true a romantic, calling,
Right.
and she was just trying to get close to him to get into his, computer and database for his job. And so I started to think about, well, we know who Derek is. He was the protagonist, but what was Skylar's motive? And why would she do that? And why would she, did she feel any guilt? Was she sociopathic? She had no remorse?
Well, that's the thing. You've already given each of those characters maybe 4 or 5 characteristics, and you've not given others. And so at some point, people's motivations become clear if you interrogate them. So people, if they're trying to scam you in some way, they're not necessarily going to say, I'm a scammer. So you're going to have to figure out exactly, what is motivating the person, and how does that make me susceptible to the person? We have this in almost all aspects of our society at this point, people who are doing things like that.
And I think, I think in another interview, you had said something fascinating, which is we as humans say one thing,
right?
We think another, and we actually do something else.
Often that's true. And I think it's really important when creating characters to create complexity and contradictoriness, contradictions right away. Humans are complex. When people just say, oh, I'm such a simple person, I'm really just a simple person, I don't believe that for a second. I've never met someone who is a truly, just to live on this earth and all of what that throws at you. So beginning to create complexity involves beginning to have contradictions and unresolved contradictions. So yeah, if I'm thinking one thing, we do this all the time. We're doing it right now. I'm talking to you, you're listening to me, then you're going to say something and I'm going to listen to you. But underneath all that in our minds, there's other things going on. Some of it may be related to the actual conversation we're having, and sometimes not. This conversation may lead in many, many different directions, depending on how the future goes and depending on what we want. So, I don't know. I have in my novella, Last Word, from very early on in that story, you have a character, the narrator, who is a proud man, and on the one hand, he feels very proud of his son. His son is intelligent, understands lots of things relating to computers that the narrator does not understand. The son has certain things going for him that make the father proud, but for other reasons, the father is deeply ashamed of his son because of things that the boy has done at school and with respect to other kids, and because he's odd in certain ways. He doesn't, like sports, which the father likes. And so once you start dealing with these kinds of unresolved contradictions, this is just the human psyche, human behavior. And we were talking earlier about what makes an opening interesting and what makes an opening compelling. And I think it's putting into motion characters that, in a sense, you know them because you've known people like them, but they're also new to you. And because they're new to you, you want to sort of discover who they are.
How does a writer know they are creating a character that's going to resonate with readers and audiences? You have one story that's about 2 different men in a house, and they're both womenizers, and one uses money to seduce the other, his looks.
Yeah.
And it sounds fascinating. I mean, we could be angry and think, oh, I don't want to hear about that. But there's part of human nature where we're drawn to someone that's like that, and we want to know what makes
Right.
them tick.
Yeah. Well, you know, characters who behave badly can be good for fiction. I mean, I think that's pretty established. And, you know, we don't always understand why they're acting the way they are. They, you know, there may be mysteries of their personality that we'll never know. But in answer to your question, one thing that you can do is show drafts to other people. And that's something that I recommend. It's something that I myself do. I'm fortunate to have a number of readers who I show drafts of my stories to. And this, you know, if you trust these people, you know, they can really give you insights into your own writing that you couldn't have yourself. So, you know, if somebody thinks something is funny or sad or whatever it is that they're reacting to, if they can give you some kind of, you know, clear and insightful response to your work, that can indicate, you know, whether this is going to resonate with readers, you know, in a larger way. But ultimately, you really don't ever know. I remember going once, I was invited to a book club that was reading one of my books, and the people in the book club sort of had a conversation about the book while I was listening. Yeah. And it's happened more than once, but the time that I'm thinking of, like, I think there were about 12 or 13 people, and honestly, 9 or 10, I really felt like, I'm not sure that you read the book that I wrote. Like, I'm like, we're not connecting. She is saying, well, I think such and such, and to me, it's not. But I think once you put something into the world, you're no longer at all in control of how other people read and interpret it. So maybe in that book group, there were 2 or 3 people who I was like, wow, I really feel connected with you. I feel like you really got what I was, you know, doing in this book. But I don't know. Anybody who's ever gotten a negative review anywhere knows what it feels like to have someone have a reaction to your work that you didn't at all plan or intend, but there it is, and you sort of have to accept that's the work is now in the world, and people are going to read it as they will.
Sure, and I think you talked about, you know, different filters, cultural, socioeconomic, you know, growing up in LA versus Iowa or Pennsylvania, wherever, and just different, you know, we're going to see things differently. Could remind us of someone we knew. Maybe we fell in love with them. Maybe we hated them. And it just invokes a reaction,
Yeah,
you know? But
totally.
we don't know that, or we don't say that.
Right.
And instead we just say, I don't like that, you know, or I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm thinking of this because you're talking about sort of transgressiveness and different people's reaction to it. You know, there are things that certain readers don't ever want to read about, like, and you can't control that as the writer. Like, you know, I may be interested in portraying X in a work of fiction, but a reader just might not ever like to encounter X. I mean, this happens.
And that is true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not into certain crime genres, but I know some people are incredibly drawn to them. Some are okay, but some I don't even want to know about.
Yeah.
And so I think that could make sense. But sometimes with just the most, it's just seemingly innocent, quote unquote, character, and it invokes such a strong reaction from people. And it can cause problems for the writer,
Yeah.
as we know. I know Margaret Atwood faced a lot of, you know, we're not talking about Salman Rushdie where people, there's a religious aspect, but just certain characters. How could you even think of something like this?
Yeah. And then you know, because of the world we live in, you know, lots of readers make, you know, very, you know, outrageous assumptions about, you know, whether something is based on your own experience or if this character is actually you with a different hair color. You know, I've had people at readings say, "So how old are your kids?" Well, I don't have kids. I read you a story in which someone has kids.